Hello everyone, Katya here from The Functional Horse. In today's video, we will be looking at 5 of the most common causes that why horses have trouble developing a good top line despite being in regular work. The top line of the horse is a very good indicator of his physical development and the quality of his training. So it tells us loads about where the horse is at. Soft and elastic, well-developed back muscles let us know that the horse is using his back correctly. And nice rounded transitions between the different area of the body means that the muscles are working in unison without some of the muscles being overworked and others being underworked. So the development of a good top line takes time, and there are many factors that play a role in this process. And it can be very frustrating when our horse does not seem to be able to develop nicely, even after years of hard work. So when that happens, we need to take a step back and reevaluate our situation, our training, and everything else. So when doing so, we need to keep in mind a holistic view of the matter, because many factors can play a role in preventing the top line to develop from developing nicely. So if we want to understand why the horse isn't able to develop his back muscles, we need to understand why he needs them in the first place. Now, when we're talking about top line, we are talking about all the muscles on the upper side of his body. So we're talking about the butt muscles, the back muscles, and the upper neck muscles. Now, when the top line is nicely developed, these muscles are smooth, they are even. The entire top line looks nicely curved, it doesn't have any sharp edges or angles. The transition from the neck to the withers is nice and smooth with no dips, lumps, and bumps. And the same goes for the transition between the withers and the rest of the back. So nice and smooth with no acute angles. The hind end is nicely rounded and all the muscles of this area are developed evenly. Now, put simply, we can divide the muscles of the body into 2 groups: muscles for movement and muscles for posture. Some muscles, like the iliopsoas, the hip flexor, can play both roles. And just remember, this is a simplification to some degree. In general, the postural muscles are smaller. They have a smaller range of motion, but they have a lot of stamina. They are meant to offer postural control to the body, but with dysfunction, they do tend to weaken and atrophy. The movement muscles are the big muscles. They're really big. They're in charge of large movements, but they fatigue quickly. So they do powerful movements, big range of motion, and when there is dysfunction, they tend to tighten. So we can think of postural muscles as long distance runners. So they can work for a very long time at low intensity. And the movement muscles like sprinters, they can work at high intensity, but not for very long. And when both of these groups are working well, we get nice and even muscular development. In general, the muscles of the top line, so the ones that we are looking at, are movement muscles, which means that their job is to perform feats like jumping, like advanced dressage movements, fast acceleration, and so on, which obviously will mean that training itself plays a huge role in the development of the top line. But the prerequisite for the top line muscles to be able to perform all these amazing feats is that they are supported by well-functioning postural muscles. Okay, here we are talking mostly about the muscles in charge of stabilizing the spine and some abdominal muscles. Another term that is often used for these muscles is core musculature. So a strong core takes care of good posture and stabilization, and then the movement muscles can go out and do all the cool things that we want our horses to do. So let's reiterate, a strong and functional core is a prerequisite for the top line muscles to do their job and develop. We need to have this in mind at all times. So moving on, let's look at training. When the postural muscles aren't functioning properly, then the big movement muscles have to take on the task of stabilization. For example, if the multifidus, which is the deep spinal muscle stabilizing the individual vertebrae, if those muscles aren't developed properly, the job of spinal stabilization will fall to the longissimus dorsi, so the long back muscle. And the horse needs a stable spine at all times, but the long back muscle is built more for short bursts of work, not continuous work. So now the long muscle has to do two jobs. It has to provide movement and it has to provide stabilization, and this is too much for it. So sooner and later, what will happen is it will become tense and tight. And tightness never stays localized. It always travels through the body, which means that eventually other muscles of the top line will suffer too. And then when muscles are tight, when they're strained, they cannot develop properly. This can happen if we don't spend enough time developing basic balance in a strong core. When we ask the horse for advanced maneuvers before he's ready for it, we are creating a chain of tension and compensation patterns. Using side reins or other gadgets to mask the horse's lack of balance is a proven recipe for uneven muscle development, for tension, and issues with the top line. The same goes for basically anything that creates an artificial headset. So if we notice that despite regular work, the horse's top line is not developing, we might need to go back to the basics and teach the horse how to carry the rider in a balanced way before we ask him to do anything more difficult, anything more discipline specific. Okay? So the next thing is equipment, tack. The next culprit for poor top line development is very often the saddle. So the purpose of the saddle is to distribute the weight of the rider as evenly as possible. And when the saddle doesn't fit well, the pressure is not even, and then we get areas of high pressure. This creates discomfort, and the horse responds by tensing the back muscles, and he stiffens his movement. And then we have the same story as with improper training. The long back muscle is asked to work in a way that it's not designed to, and it's constantly tense. So in the long run, this will prevent the muscle from developing. And pressure points created by ill-fitting saddles can also cause poor circulation in those high-pressure areas, which prevents the muscle from gaining the nutrients that it needs to grow. So picking a right saddle for your horse is absolutely crucial. But unfortunately, it's also a very difficult and demanding process. So always get a qualified saddle fitter out. And never forget that a saddle that fit once might not fit anymore in a year or even less as the horse develops or loses weight or whatever. So in order to avoid any issues caused by saddle fit, the fit should be evaluated by a qualified professional on a regular basis. Now, when we are talking about tack and equipment, we mostly focus on the saddles, but the bit and bridle can play a big role too. If they don't fit properly, they can and will create tension around the mouth, the TMJ, and the poll. And then that tension will eventually make its way to the neck, to the thoracic sling, and it will prevent the horse from using his body correctly. So don't forget to check that as well. Next up, we have musculoskeletal issues. So any existing issues with the musculoskeletal system can prevent muscular development. So besides improper training or ill-fitting tack, many other factors can trigger the compensation chain as well. For example, if there is tension and a lack of range of motion in the lumbar area, in the pelvic area, which can be a consequence of falls, of kicks, or unresolved lamenesses, that will also impact the horse's ability to develop those muscles. So when the mobility of one body part is compromised, the body starts to compensate, which will cause imbalance in the soft tissues. Now, this, of course, creates more tension and leads to a vicious cycle, which then prevents top-line development. The compensation cycle can just as easily begin in the front as well. So any dysfunction in the thoracic sling prevents the horse from lifting up between the shoulder blades and using his back correctly. Now, with the term thoracic sling, we generally use that term to describe the group of muscles attaching the front legs to the rest of the body, and it plays a crucial role in force absorption and in balanced movement. And dysfunction in this area can be caused by many things, and very often is also caused by imbalances in the hooves. This is especially the case when the horse tends to land toe first because of imbalance in the hooves, because that will then change the biomechanics of the entire front limb of the thoracic sling and cause issues elsewhere. So here we have a photo of a horse with a clearly dysfunctional thoracic sling, and if we look down, clearly imbalanced hooves. So a horse like this, no wonder that he doesn't develop top-line muscles despite regular work. So we need to address those issues first and then start working again. Now, the next factor we will be looking at is dental issues. Dysfunction in the neck and the thoracic sling can also stem from teeth issues. When the range of motion of the mandible is limited because of dental issues, this will create tension in the temporomandibular joint and in the poll. And if this is the case, then we will often have issues with contact, with issues with bend. Those are some of the symptoms. So then a horse that is going against the rider's hand is tensing up his poll, he's tensing up his his neck muscles, and he is blocking the proper functioning of the thoracic sling. And then again, like we said, tension never stays in one place. So then it gets transferred further down the body. So we see that really issues in any part of the body can create tension patterns that prevent proper top-line functioning. The last factor I want to talk about is nutrition, because obviously muscles need nutrients to build, to develop. And if the body doesn't have enough building blocks, then it can't build the top line, regardless of how great our training is, regardless of how well our saddle fits. When building muscles, the body needs protein, and protein is made up of different amino acids. And the horse's body will be able to utilize protein to build muscles only if it has all the different amino acids available. Because if there's a shortage of one type of amino acid, the building process stops. And this is why it's really, really important that the diet provides good quality protein. One way to make sure we are providing all the amino acids is to provide different sources of forage. Obviously, good quality hay is a forage source, a good forage source, and so is pasture, if your horse is okay with grass. Then we have hay cubes, alfalfa, and the like. So we can also add some protein to the diet by providing flaxseed, chia seeds, soybean meal, and the like, but just be sure to, when you are implementing changes into your horse's diet, be sure to consult a nutritionist, as equine nutrition can turn out to be quite a complex subject. So always get a professional to help you there, and he can give you the best advice for your specific situation. So when we are dealing with a horse that doesn't seem to be developing as it should, despite the training, we need to check these things. This is the initial list that we need to consult. So training, does the horse have a strong and functional horse? And does he know how to move in a balanced way under the rider? Equipment, make sure there are no areas of high pressure, make sure the saddle fits well, make sure the bit and the bridle fit well. So have a fitter out on a regular basis. Next up, myofascial dysfunction, muskuloskeletal health. Are there any pre-existing issues? Are there any old injuries, any compensation patterns that haven't been resolved? If you're not sure, get a good body worker out. They will be able to help you with some advice. And also always make sure that the horse's feet are balanced and that he is not landing toe first. And then the last thing, nutrition. Is he getting enough good quality protein to build muscles? And if he is not, consult a nutritionist, and they can help you with a diet plan. So although this is obviously not an exhaustive list of everything that could be contributing to poor top line development, it's a good place to start. So always check the list. And then if you're still at a loss, consult a veterinarian, consult a professional. And let's not forget that muscles don't develop overnight. To properly develop his top line, the horse needs up to 2 years of regular and correct work. Depends on the age, the breed, and everything. It depends on the individual horse, obviously. So when assessing progress, photographs taken at regular intervals can be a huge help. So if you take a photo every 3 months, then you can clearly see if you are progressing well or not. And if the development starts to stagnate or if it starts to go backwards, then you need to think about all the factors that we mentioned here. And never forget that the easiest way to avoid issues is to prevent them in the first place. So make sure the feet and teeth are balanced, make sure the saddle is regularly checked, make sure to build up the horse's core and his posture before you ask him for more advanced stuff. Support all of this with adequate nutrition, and don't forget about a healthy, horse-appropriate environment that enables social interaction and free movement. Thank you very much for watching. For more information, visit our webpage at thefunctionalhorse.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to our new weekly newsletter. All right, until next time, goodbye.